And welcome to the BNB Show, where we, after doing all this coverage with all of these prospects, doing all the individual positional shows, you know we're going to be doing a wrap-up of each day of these drafts in order for us to just kind of pick through and do a little bit of an autopsy. So I got my man back in the house, Seahawks Brendan Nelson, to help me chop it up, take a look at this first round, take a look at who our Seahawks picked and what was not necessarily a super surprising pick. But before we get to Seattle's pick, I would first like to kind of pick Brendan's brain. And Brendan, it's great to have you in the house, man. Was all the coverage good today with you?
I had a good time. I had a good time with it, man.
It was a good time.
We were up at like 1,300 people, I think, almost when we made our pick, which I think is a record for the channel.
Let's go. Let's go. Nice work. Well done. It was a fun day. The 12th man energy on my side was good too, which was always awesome to see. But I guess the first part is knowing somebody who's also studied this draft and lead up the draft and general trends and new things that kind of happen. Was there anything that jumped out to you from this first round before we get to the individual micro on Seattle, is just as far as the overarching look at this first round in general terms? Anything maybe that stood out that was substantially different or a trend this year that you saw?
It did kind of feel like Carolina taking Tet McMillan at 8 kind of threw us into a little bit of an odd timeline, because I wasn't expecting McMillan to go to Carolina at 8, and I didn't get the sense a lot of people expected that. And I feel like after that, things just kind of went a little bit crazy. Like Loveland going 10 to the Bears, did not see that coming. That was probably motivated by Banks going the pick before. I'll bet the Bears wanted to take Banks, and then they couldn't. So I think that was a part of it. And then you had Mykel Williams going to the Niners, which I definitely didn't have. I definitely didn't think that was going to happen. Tyler Booker goes 12 overall, which, I mean, I know some people like Booker more than I do, but I think that's a pick you could have made in the 20s. You could have traded back very easily and still gotten him. I don't know. At that point, it kind of felt like we were entering a unexpected timeline, and a timeline that I wasn't necessarily loving, because a lot of the players that I really liked were coming off the board. Like one thing that you said a couple weeks ago was that there was a sense that a lot of quarterbacks were going to go in that top 17.
Yeah.
And you said there could be 3, maybe even 4. And I was like, that sign me up for that. We didn't even get 2. I was really kind of disappointed in that. I really thought we were going to get the Jackson Dart in the top 5. I thought we were going to get Shadur in the top 10. I thought we were going to get Tyler Shock in the teens. I was ready for it. And these teams wised up at the last second, I guess, because they just decided, no, not this year. No more goofiness. So we didn't get that. And I think that by the time we got to like the later part of the first round, things started making a little more sense. Things kind of normalized a little bit. But that was a very interesting middle part of the first round to me.
Yeah, I felt like I have similar feelings on it. I think taking away from a major takeaway from what you're saying on that would be fair to say that it's, for the most part, you can find your exceptions with a Booker where, you know, you're a little bit lower on Booker, but a lot of NFL teams were very high on Booker. Cowboys weren't the only one. And some of it is scheme dependent, where he's not necessarily going to the pure zone stuff, where it is going to be more gap and man-on-man stuff you can do there with the Cowboys. But I did think that throughout the first round, it just stood out to me that mainly with the exception of a few picks, whereas maybe normal drafts will get 7, 8, 9 picks in the first round where you go, there's a little bit of a head scratcher there / what were they doing? This draft to me was more about, there wasn't as many of those picks. Teams smartly picked the good players for where they should go. I know other people didn't have Tet McMillan as high as I had him, or Mykel Williams as high as I had him. This was really, to me, of one that in a lot of ways validated some of the guys that you and I have liked in this draft, who everybody's been telling us we're too high on, be it a Mykel Williams, who you took in the Bleacher Report first round this last week, or be it Kenneth Grant, who you and I have mocked many times in our mock draft, going up ahead of us as well. So is that a fair way of putting your outlook to that you felt like these teams kind of did it smartly, which sucks?
I think I agree with that. I think I agree. I'm not into the Loveland at 10. To me, that's I don't understand that one. I don't understand that. Not a big fan of Booker at 12. I'm still not. Other than that, I agree. Like I think that there was an expectation, like when you were saying 3 or 4 quarterbacks could go in this top 17. I think that's you saying, I anticipate these teams are going to be stupid, because I think that you would agree that taking Tyler Shock in the teens is stupid, right?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Yeah, 100%. It wasn't signed off on one thing, those quarterbacks should go there, but like you said, they smartened up at the last minute. Like they're going
Yeah.
between the wires, Brett, and they're like, red or blue, and they just blindly cut one of the wires and they happen to get the right cut.
Yeah. So for the most part, I was impressed. There, a couple other little goofy things, I guess. Walter Nolan going ahead of Derek Harmon. I don't understand that. Like, to me, if you need a 3-tech, Harmon is clearly the better player. I liked Luther Burden more than Egbuka personally, so I was a little surprised that Egbuka went, and I think Burden's still on the board, actually. Yeah, he is. He is. But for the most part, I think things went fairly well. I am assuming, by the way, I am just going to assume that something's very wrong with Will Johnson. Like, I don't think every single team in the league just had their brains fall out to where they're not drafting one of the 3 best players in this draft at, 29, 28, or wherever. Like something's wrong. Okay, I'm going to just assume that now. I'm going to assume that there's something really, really medically not okay there. But yeah, I would say teams were smart.
Yeah, I think there's a double dip with Johnson too, because you have both. There may be a chronic issue with the knee, but then you also have the lack of the testing. So it'd be one thing maybe if you go, okay, I've got the chronic knee, but he ran a 4.5, so he's got enough juice. He'll be fine for the outside. But it's another thing if you're thinking we're about to get a guy with a chronic knee who's a 4.6 guy, and now you start getting really, really, really worried at that point. And I agree, that does seem to be a big takeaway that we can walk away from within this draft. Morrison as well, who's a first-round talent that's going into the second round in this draft. I think you can say there's a big part that has to do with the medicals that are impacting it. A lot of corners in this draft with medical issues you're having to kind of fight through. Siobhan Ravel, another one you got to kind of figure your way through on that one. I thought the 2 dumbest decisions by freaking far in this draft, and I'm kind of red hot. I'm a red hot tomato right now, Brendan. Okay, I'm a red hot tamale. And the first one was like, oh, okay, look, you took advantage of the preschooler at the general managership out there in Jacksonville, so be it. I thought Jacksonville got taken to school. The Browns get saved at the Deshaun Watson contract. But worse than that, that one I didn't like, I don't care about. But the one I care about, the one that pissed me off, is I think that the Falcons just gave the Rams the pathway to maybe going to get an Arch Manning.
Yeah, I'm not okay with that. I was not okay with that. And like you do that, and then you get who? You get James Pierce Jr., who I guess some people like him more than I did, but I don't think anybody thought he was. I don't think anybody was sitting there going like, I can't believe James Pierce Jr. is still here. Somebody needs to trade up and go get that guy. Yeah. I don't think that was happening.
No, it's about the right place that he should have gone in the draft. And he's got some character concerns that seem to be valid to a degree to him as well with it. And they're also not a player away, are they? Are they just a player away?
I don't think so. I mean, there's a reason why they double dipped on pass rusher. They have no pass rushers on that team. They got nothing going on there. So, I guess they were a decent team last year. They could be decent again. I don't think they're, and it's a weak division, right? It's a weak division. They could win the division by accident, but I'm not happy about that trade at all.
I'm really not, Brendan. And how many of these first round gambles have these teams taken in recent years that have just blown up back in their face? Like the Eagles landing Jalen Carter on the other side of it with that Saints pick that they made a couple of years ago. I'm really worried about this one, and you're going to allow them to go right from Stafford to maybe an Arch, or right from Stafford to a Drew Aller. And league, can we quit helping out LA, please? They don't need the help. They don't need the help.
Yeah. That one. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that one. That's like a GM that thinks he's about to get fired or something, and is like, I got to start pulling these strings because I don't like, if this season goes badly, I'm going to get fired anyway. I don't care about losing the first round pick because I'm going to get fired. Yeah. And if the season goes well, then I don't get fired. Like that's what it smacks of. And
hard to understand, hard to wrap your head around, and I hope it doesn't work out well for him, but that one's got me as worried as anything coming out of this first round is what the Rams were able to pull off of that situation. As we then do get to as we buried the lead here a little bit, to the actual Hawk pick, and understanding that up ahead of them, there was a lot of value taken. There was a lot of guys that we really loved and thought were great connections to the Hawk organization at 18 that were off the board by the time the Seattle was picking, Brendan. And so they do come around to picking at that point. And you land in on the guy that was heavily connected here to the Seahawks team, Grey Zabol.
Right. So first off, first thought, first consideration, we might have a leak in the organization we need a patch. We might, because the reports coming out yesterday were that the Seahawks were going to take Grey Zabol. And I made a video about this, and I was like, well, because it was Ted McMillan or Grey Zabol, right?
Right.
So I was like, if we take one of those two guys, then it's possible that it's a real leak. So maybe get that looked at. Let me just start there. There might be something there, not definitely, but there could be something cooking there. Like you might have a leaky boat here. Just something to think about.
Yeah, I mean it's possible. I think they could be trying to purposely do a bit of it too, where they're hoping to maybe drive a team that was hot to trot for Zabel up, maybe. Because it did seem like when you saw him pick, didn't you feel like, did you see the warm room cam when they picked, where there was definitely a sense of like they weren't pumped up and doing high fives and doing hip checks, and it was kind of a sense of almost kind of subdued nature to what I saw from him, and maybe a feeling of like you're trying to drive for that trade back. You wanted to do what the Rams did, just couldn't get it going.
Yeah, that maybe. We know we tried to trade back, like it was reported. I don't know if you saw, and I only saw it after the fact because I was so focused in on the actual draft, but there was a bunch of reporting when our pick was up that we were trying to trade back and we just couldn't get it done. And I kind of thought that could happen. It seems like that's happening a lot lately, where teams just aren't moving up. They're not giving up enough to move up lately. Like you have to do, like Atlanta's an exception. Like what Atlanta did, one of the reasons why what Atlanta did stands out so much is the fact that teams don't do that very much anymore. It doesn't happen as much as it used to. And I wasn't shocked about that we weren't able to move back. I was disappointed because when our pick came up, I was thinking that would be a pretty reasonable outcome.
Sorry, give me a 1 second here.
Oh, okay, no problem. Just 1 second, guys. He'll be right back, and we will continue on. Just give me a couple minutes here. All right.
Sorry about that.
Everything okay?
Yeah, we're good.
All right. So once you can't make the trade back with so many players that you might have wanted off the board, like you said, it wasn't exactly how we drew it up, right? It wasn't. Like supposedly we might have wanted Jalen Walker. Now, I wasn't a huge Jalen Walker guy. I think he's good, but he's gone. Michael is gone. Supposedly we loved Loveland. He was gone. Banks was gone. McMillan was gone. Like a lot of the guys that I would have really been hot to trot on were gone. The two guys left that I would have been hot to trot on were Will Johnson. And now I think we know that something's really, really not okay there. And Jihad Campbell. That would have been the other guy that I would have been like, dancing on stream if we had picked that guy. But it wasn't exactly a big pool of pump your fist guys to draw from. So given that, with what we did, I think it's good. I do want to go ahead and preface it with that. I think the pick is fine. I think the pick works. I will say my perspective on this pick was changed dramatically, like maybe 5 minutes after the pick was made, when Seattle listed him as a guard and Mike McDonald said he's going to be a guard. That made me like the pick more, because for the most part, people have talked about Grey Zabol as a center. In my experience, people have talked about him as a NFL center. So through the lens of him being a center, I thought the pick was okay. I wasn't terribly excited about it. I think there are some issues, some concerns I have there. But when I started thinking about him as a left guard, I actually kind of started to be like, okay, I think I can get into this. So I like it. I have a couple of concerns, but overall I'd say it's a good pick.
Yeah, I like it too. It's not a dance on stream kind of pick. And I will say those other two names you mentioned, Jelon Walker or Campbell, I think I'm much liking more of this pick versus that. I come back to Campbell again and again saying that, look, he would not have been an edge here. He would not have been taking significant edge snaps. So you're basically blowing out at least the first 2 years of that guy's rookie contract with him doing very little out on the football field. And that's really just not a great approach for first round picks, in my opinion. With Zabel, you were left with, like you also very well encapsulated, Brendan, you were left with a line of guys that there was no matching success there. There was no, God, I can't believe this guy dropped in our lap. There's, how could this guy land us? What did the NFL doing? Instead, teams were smart. They did the proper right thing ahead of you. And so you had to then just kind of stay in the pocket. You wanted to move back. We saw with there being so few teams willing to move that was hard to make that deal happen. So it's not really what you do. You can't just operate from like, I want to move back by any measure, just move back. It's like, well, there's got to be a deal there that you can actually go and that's facilitated. And there wasn't. And I put it all into the wash on that. And you got to deal with the hand you're dealt sometimes. And it'd be great to get a flush, but sometimes you just got to work off the pair and try to salvage the hand for what it is when it comes to it. And I think that they did that here with this pick. I will say that I get the feeling of being better about the guard side of this, but I will say that this is also a little bit of, maybe don't read too much in this, because it's, we'll try him out at left guard first. But the second that doesn't start working at left guard, he goes and kicks into center. So that transition timeline from guard to center could be a very quick one from one to the other on that one versus what they're telling us right now. But even if he washes out to center, I think he's a very safe player and that he's going to give you an upper level center for the position. He's going to give you a top 10 level center when he eventually shakes out to who he is and you get past a rookie year, let's say, and get him into being a vet a little bit. He's at least gives you that upside as a player. And that makes me still okay with it, even if he's a first round guy giving you that as the returns.
Yeah, I feel like in order to be worth the 18th overall pick as a center, you have to be like a top 5 center in the league. But at left guard, I feel like it's different because I think left guard is more valuable. And I know this is subjective and some people aren't going to agree, especially with Kubiak apparently really liking the idea of having a really good center in his offense. But to me, the left guard position is more valuable. So therefore, I think the bar that you have to clear in order to be considered a success is it's just a little bit lower, so it's a little bit easier to clear. So that's kind of what I'm looking for here. And I know the main thing with Grey Zabol is he has very, very short arms. So that's kind of the main thing we're going to be talking about going forward here. He has some of the shortest arms ever for a guard, and his arms are still very short by center standards. So that could end up being the issue that we run into here. But I'm hoping that it works out at left guard, because if you could take care of that position for the foreseeable future, I think that's worth a lot.
Do you think that there's a big quantitative difference between the 5th highest rated center in this sport and the 10th highest rated center in this sport?
I think so. I do.
Right.
I do. Maybe it's not worth like a win, but I do think that is something that can add up over time.
And I think I think it's probably fairly smaller, I would believe, from my standpoint of the difference between those two sections of things, and that enough so that it's kind of mitigated a bit in the difference of there. I think you're right in the ideal. I'm not pushing against your argument and saying that the ideal is if I take a first round center, I want a top 5 center that I'm getting for the position, but getting close to that or almost onto that mark. And he has top 5 center potential. I'm just saying, I think if we just get to where I know realistically, I know he'll salvage out too, right? Washes out a guard, bare minimum I get, because I do consider this more of a high floor guy than anything else. I think the high floor is that you're getting the top 10 with even that potential of getting to the top 5 stage of things. But I think that's at least your floor, and that's solid enough for me. Really, the consideration here, Brendan, is that it's not in a vacuum, but with what the lay of the land was around these picks, who you had available on the board. That's what really drives me back to making it okay at that point. Because was there a top 5 player, a potential that you got in this draft and at that first round pick where you're taking there? I mean, maybe an Emawari, maybe you could say a Starks, but certainly not from a position that's a high value position in the sport, right?
Yeah. I found myself a little more cold with Starks than I expected after having a chance to really study him, honestly. I did value him more than Zabol personally, but I wasn't going to be throwing a party if we got Starks. I would have been like, that's a good pick, which I ended up landing in a similar spot with Zabol anyway. So I can definitely see that angle of it. We just didn't get enough teams panicking in this draft.
We didn't, man. We needed more dumbasses. That's really what it comes down to. We needed more guys that were just putting the dunce cap on their head and throwing darts. And instead, the only team that decided to do that decided to help out our division rival. So,
yeah, the closest thing we got to, I'd say, a dumbass pick ahead of us was probably, I'd say Loveland. I don't understand how a tight end who doesn't block at all is worth the 10th overall pick.
Well, I think if he turns into a Trey McBride type, which is the comp for him, and he doesn't give you much blocking, but he gives you 100 catch ability, which I do think that he has that pass catching ability in his bag. Michigan just didn't, they don't throw the ball much. So you just don't get a large opportunity to get him, giving you a Harold Fannin type season or a Tyler Warren type season. That's not the way they used him. The pick that I go to is really the Walter Nolan pick. That's the one to me that stands out as the real that's the idiot pick to me in the first round from the Cardinals. Being that Derek Harmon was still on the board and I think is going to be a much better player. The Walter Nolan's hot and cold engine, the way that runs to the other guys that were available on the board. They could add Jihad Campbell. That's a much more significant upgrade to them in that position there than going and taking Walter Nolan to me. I think the Cardinals messed this first round up almost as much as anybody maybe that didn't make a trade, in my opinion. But I get the Loveland thing on the not blocking, and that's part of why I put him into the second round grade. And same thing, look, tight end's got to block, man. And if you can't block, I can't just hide that away. I can't just protect you from that. It's going to get exposed. And there's no two ways around that. I also am not a fan of Chicago with that approach. I've already taken so many skill position players there from Moore to Adunzier. And you keep going to that well with it. And I know they rebuilt their line with free agency and all that, but I don't know about the Bears approach in general. No, when it's all said and done there.
Yeah. That was the closest thing to a pick that really makes me scratch my head ahead of us. And I guess Nolan, but I don't think we were ever going to take Nolan anyway. So it's not really affected us. No. It was just about the stupidity to me of the pick there with that for the Cardinals, and where they could have gone in so many other directions that I think it would have been smarter approach for them, in my opinion. So, right. So, yeah. So, turning it back to Zabol here, by the way, I just checked on Mock Draftable. Over the last 26 years, Grey Zabol's arm length would be in the 6th percentile for guards, and it would be in the 22nd percentile for centers. So either way you slice it, he's got some stuff to overcome. But as a guard, he's really trying to defy the history of the position. He is indeed. And we'll see if he can overcome it. Some guys can, some guys can, some guys can't. Something that stood out to me was looking into the stream on this is he's a guy with, I think, 15 penalties over the past 2 years. And so, that arm length gets exposed, huh? Penalty magnet. I will say in regards to this, though, something that was interesting as a comp study on this, Brendan, is that who's the guy that I've been comping Zabol out to from last year's draft? Was it Tipman? Graham Barton. Oh, okay. Graham Barton. I've only said it like 24 times to you, brother. But Graham Barton. Okay. I've looked at a lot of names lately. I know. It's and you're late in the day. We've been streaming all day, so I'm messing with you. But Graham Barton, I wanted to check when I saw that penalty thing and go look at Barton as for reference. Because, Barton also had to play left tackle too in college, right? Because that's a part of Zabol here is that the reason you get the penalty magnet, 32 arms playing left tackle, you're going to get in a lot of those situations where you're going to have to panic hold because you just don't have long enough arms to get it done. So important here, Graham Barton had 13 penalties through his final 2 years of college. So also, maybe you could say a little bit of this is why you don't have him at tackle in the first place. You're doing what's best for the team at that point, not necessarily what's best for the player, what's best for the prospect, or best for what's going to be ultimately his best landing spot when it comes to being a pro. But it does not also mean necessarily that that's going to carry over to guard or center on that. That's just why you don't want them there on tackle. You buying what I'm selling on that? Yeah. He's got no chance at tackle. Like some people in the chat were trying to say, well, he played tackle in college. What if he's, and he's like, no, I don't even think he'll get a chance to play tackle. Like, why waste the time? No, there's no spot with him going out to tackle at all. He's going to be a guard or center. And I think that, like you mentioned, the arm length thing, I think that's as much as anything that might push him into center as much as anything. What you mentioned on that, the 6th percentile and the 26th percentile. There's a reason that very few guys operate from that at that size. So something to monitor with him. He does have a pretty good wingspan, but it is a part of the impact. It does play out on the field. You do see it, in the field. Are you worried about his height? He's 6'6", which is very tall for a center. Not as much because of the fact that we've seen some of these guys come through at guard, at least, we've seen plenty of 6'7" guards, 6'8" guards operating there. I think if that can happen, I think there's little difference between a guard to a center operating in at that height. If they can make it work, they can make it work. I would like a little bit more of the length, right? Because this guy, remember the whole talk that we heard from Kelsey
talking about the tough matchups that he had, and he was mentioning Poona Ford's name. And remember, the whole thing with that was that, well, I'm smaller than most defensive tackles, so I can go win the leverage war. And if I couldn't win the leverage war and the guy was smaller than me, I could always win with extra long arms to keep that guy off of me. Okay, but what happens here with Zabel when he can't win the leverage war and the guy's got a Poona Ford coming across from him who's also got longer arms than him? How is he going to be able to deal with that? And I think that that's a valid bit of a concern. I think he will find a way around it. I do, but this is why it's a worry there. The losing the leverage with the lack of length is not a good recipe.
Right. Yeah, that's a part of the reason why I'm not convinced that his floor is super high, the way you were talking about it, where his floor is a top 10 center. I think his floor is lower than that. I think he's got a tremendous ceiling because he's so athletic. I actually think this is a high variance pick. And I appreciate that. I think that you should be drafting guys that you think can be stars or superstars in the first round. And sometimes you do have that lower floor because of it. That's a trade-off that I think is reasonable to make sometimes. And I'm cool with this being that time. But I actually look at Grey Zabol and I think to myself, there's some low-end potential here because his arms are so short. He might just not be able to really make it anywhere. Like, that is possible. He was playing at North Dakota State. He was not playing at Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where you're coming from on that. I definitely am in a bit of a disagreement on this because at the end of the day, we can sometimes get too much caught in measurables and testing times. And especially when you get to making this the thing that ends up overriding all of the tape that you watch in a guy, that this becomes the one thing that you get caught up in and obsessed with versus when I turn on the tape, the guy's kicking ass and taking names. Is there times where at tackle, he's exposed on the length? Well, yeah, he's 2 inches shorter than you'd like him out there probably for being out the line. Is it a little more mitigated to the inside? Yeah, it absolutely is going to be more mitigated to the inside. And when you turn on the tape, it's not like he's right and left being exposed on the arm length side. As well, the whole point of the Senior Bowl, and I'm not a guy to say the Senior Bowl should go and win you out on a player and take you from a player that's here to there, like the Seahawks did with LJ Collier, Brendan. But what the point of the Senior Bowl is to do is to take a guy like this that's played against that lesser competition, put him up now in this modern Senior Bowl era where we're now getting actual first-round guys coming to the Senior Bowls. And maybe they're not playing the game, but they're in there on one-on-ones. They're repping it out. And what did we hear about Grey Zabol throughout the whole process of the Senior Bowl is that he was kicking everybody's ass in those one-on-ones to the point that you had defensive linemen fighting each other to get back into the drill and take him on again. And these are names that are being taken in this first round that he's whooping their butts on. So I'm not saying that should carry the day. It shouldn't win everything out. But when you pair that to the tape, to me, that stuff should not be overridden by this marker of 6th percentile or 22 percentile. And I think that maybe is a little bit here on, I mean, from your standpoint of this one, just a little bit too much. Not that it shouldn't have some weight, but it shouldn't be carrying this much weight, I would say.
Yeah, I have my notes from the Senior Bowl here, and this is obviously a couple months ago, so I'm not going to be able to remember everything, but I remember what I wrote was that Grey Zabol looked great in practice, but I don't think he looked as good in the game. I thought he got beat up a little bit in the game. Do you remember having a different impression on that?
I don't concentrate as much on the game with it, to be honest with you. So I don't remember like getting too intricately with it. I'm more concerned to the practice week, in my opinion. Like, the game's nice and all that, but you're playing with guys you never play around you. You're running vanilla schemes. This is not you're not replicating game day conditions, really. It's very much set up for the defense in many ways to have successes against you, especially when it comes to the blocking stuff and all that. So I would go more to the one-on-ones through that. And I heard from straight from the horses now, the guy that's EJ Schneider from Bootleg Football, who was there in person, relaying this very story to me directly, right from the horse's mouth. And he's not a guy that's going to, blow smoke in this regards or just kind of pump things up artificially. This was him, offering and saying, hey, this is it. And he, by the way, texted me this morning when I'm doing a show with him on next Wednesday. He texted me this morning, Grey Zabol was the pick, by the way. So in regards to your leak thing and the stuff about hearing this from different camps, a little bit more smoke to your fire on that one, that went down. But that's, to me, it is a substantial thing. It shouldn't be undersold a little bit because that's the point of that for these very kind of prospects.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense to me. I think that can, I think that explains a lot. So I'm looking at my notes that I had on Zabol from the pre-draft process. The thing that's really interesting here is he's obviously a phenomenal athlete, and that's kind of the main draw of him. I think he's a phenomenal fit for this zone blocking scheme. should be great in space, really good moving from landmark to landmark, but he's not small. Like, you think about Jason Kelsey, he's 290 or something, probably 295, maybe. Zabel checked in at 312. So this is kind of a freak of nature here. You have a guy who is really tall, really big, but he can vertical jump almost over 3 feet. He broad jumped 9 foot 3 inches, and he didn't run a 40, but if he did, I'll bet it would have been really nice. It would have been a good 40. So he is kind of that fat physical freak.
Well, I think you touch on an important topic with this, an important point with this, Brendan, because you and I have been talking recently about a bit of the transition that we're seeing from the Shanahan scheme of the interior offensive lineman, being that the historical markers on this are that you were looking for the athletic guys that can move in space, but that we're seeing more of the transition of these bigger guys inside now starting to operate. The Aaron Banks being the greatest example we've discussed. The Niners draft him, not really a fit athletically, but you draft him. Then now he goes to Green Bay, the same scheme, giving him a 4-year, $77 million deal. What? Now I got the same scheme in 2 different places taking on this player that's not necessarily particularly athletic. What's going on? And I think it's dialing back to that. We're getting more of the A and the B gap runs, more of the heavy runs, more of the power runs. And so you now need the guy that can drive those guys out the ball, not just be so light, because you're 290 and you're trying to drive block. That ain't working. You got a guy who's 320 across me or 340, like one tech, Brendan. Like, what are you going to do? There's only so far leverage gets you when you're giving up 50, 60, 70 pounds to a guy. But this is the best of both worlds, to your point. That's why I say it's a good point, because you're getting the guy now who's got the beef inside to operate out of the power game, but has the athleticism to still be able to do all the stuff you want within the scheme, to pull in space, climb to the second level, hit those reach blocks.
Yeah. And that's the thing with Zabel too. He has leg drive. He's not one of these zone linemen who can't move anybody. Like, there are guys out there like that for sure.
Yeah.
Like Jared Wilson, really not a big impact player in the run game at all. Dylan Fairchild, not really doing anything on that front either. Like, they're finesse offensive linemen. And I know that sounds like a contradiction, but no, there are a lot of finesse offensive linemen out there. I do think that Zabel needs to get some additional strength, but he has leg drive. He has a little bit of an anchor. So there is a chance for him to be a really good all-around player. He'll be strong enough to hold up, and he'll be mobile enough to do zone stuff. I think he's a better zone fit than gap fit, of course, but he might be capable of doing both ends of it.
Agreed. Yeah, it's my outlook, and it's why I come to that solid 4 point from just my perspective on where I land with him so heartily on that. It's just, I think it's going to fit. It's going to work. There's still some stuff that's got to get, cleaned up and fixed a bit. You're going to have to get a little bit through the length and make sure he can find his way through the forest on that one. But I think he will, and that the kid's got a lot of natural talent, and that if you didn't take him here, there's no doubt in my mind that Zabel was going to go in the first round. And at the very least, we're probably Donovan Jackson went at 24, if not, earlier than that, quite frankly.
Well, the buzz before the draft started was that he had no chance of getting down to us. Like, Dallas loved him, Miami loved him, San Francisco loved him. Now, maybe it was all a bunch of BS, but that's what we were hearing. I remember thinking to myself, oh, there's no way Zabel's going to be at 18 now. Yeah,
it was weird how it's so strange how these draft stocks on these guys, because you're like me, you're connecting to the pulse of what you're hearing, and you're like, guy starts out here in second round and he drives up to the first, and then you're like, well, you'd be reaching for him at 18 in the first, and then you're getting to draft day and it's like, well, no, he's going to go 12. No, he's going 10. No, he's going 12. And you're like, whoa. Now it's suddenly like he's going to be a value pick if he lands on us. It's just weird how it can go like that. And just, it's the spin cycle of draft coverage, I suppose, where it just kind of goes every which way.
Yeah. It takes too long. It takes too long to get through the draft process, and you end up forcing headlines because like you have to talk yourself into stuff that is not true.
Well, and if I can, Brendan, just give us a tiny pat on the back, though, just to a degree on this, because you and me had guys, Kenneth Grant, Michael Williams, and these are people that if you go to fans and you go to a lot of even natural pundits that are out there talking about those two particular players, none of them had them going up this high in this draft. Two guys that we have a heavy affinity for, two of our favorite guys in this draft. And I think that we were, validated in our outlook and approach on this, as we had gotten a lot of pushback from our individual channels at times on these players and liking them so much to see these guys go up ahead of our pick. Just a tiny pat. I'm not,
well, Ted McMillan too.
And McMillan. I forgot McMillan too. Throw him in there as well. Guys that we said, hey, this guy's going to be higher. Some people go, no, I got a second round grade on Ted McMillan. It's like, no, he's not going that far back. There's no way the NFL is going to get this one wrong.
I had people in my comments saying, like, please don't take McMillan at 18. He's lazy. He's stupid. He hates football. And I'm like, you guys are crazy, but it doesn't matter because he's not going to be there. And he wasn't even close to being there.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I don't know why there's some of these guys that are such easy evaluations that some people are really getting. But I think that, like you said, such a long time, there's just an extra amount of time to kind of pick at guys. Genty was another guy that would get talked about as, oh, he's not going top 10. There's no way Genty will go. I heard that for months. It's like, yes, he is. NFL is not letting, after Saquon Barkley just ripped through this league last year, a talent like this is not going to slide out of the first 10 picks of the draft. Just not happening.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
hell, he didn't make it out of the top freaking, well, he made it to 6. He went to Carroll. We could see that one coming a mile away, right?
Yeah, that was the pick that made the most sense.
100%. I was like, yeah, no duh there. Taker 610, thank you for the $2 donation. Good to see you in the house, brother. Shedeur had a Will Levis like fall into the second round. How far does the man go, Brendan? How far does the man go?
Well, I'll tell you, I wasn't really that surprised by him falling, though. Like, Levis surprised me. But in the case of Shedeur, I was kind of feeling like that's where things were trending. There were some of the, I mean, I know they're just anonymous quotes from NFL executives and stuff, but some of the things being said about Shedeur were, historically disrespectful. And I got the sense that he was flunking his interviews and teams were really, really souring on him. So I wasn't shocked, but does he go to Cleveland tomorrow with that first pick of the second round? Does this get ended quickly?
I think it has to, because of the fact, not that Cleveland has the first pick in the second round, but because Cleveland has the fourth pick as well in the second round. That's what probably makes it likely that that's where Shedeur goes. And if not Shedeur, then Jalen Milroe. One of those will be the pick there in the second round at that point with Cleveland. And Cleveland, man, you got your butt saved, you guys. Congratulations. You got bailed out of one of the worst mistakes, if not the worst mistake in NFL history. You should be paying the price for years to come. And instead, they let you off the hook. They Dennis Greened your butt.
Yeah.
So congrats on that.
Yeah, I don't understand. There are only 32 NFL GM jobs in the world, and you can't find 32 people that consistently know what they're doing.
Well, there's no way you can convince me that a junior high student is the best candidate for the job, which is essentially about what they hired. I understand everything's about youth and going for, all that, but like, there's something to be said for experience at the top of the mark when you're going for a guy that's been around the block a little bit and knows what he's doing. Versus taking a flyer and a risk. I'll take a flyer risk on a first-time coach, but a GM, I know everybody's got to have a first job somewhere, but not that young, not that inexperienced, and he got taken to school today, in my opinion. But I see if he doesn't go there, maybe to the Raiders at 5.
Or the Saints at 8.
Or the Saints at 8. So you're going to see 2 quarterbacks probably, in my opinion, in the first 10 picks tomorrow go. Even the Jets at 10 are going to be in play to take 2 of those quarterbacks. So Shedeur and Milroe probably go in that range, which we want to see, by the way. That's good for us. Shock, if he can go 2, that'd be all the better. Let him get them all off the board.
Yeah.
Let them all,
Yeah. How many quarterbacks went total in the first round? It was just the 2, right?
2. Just 2.
Okay. So we still got Shock, still got Shedeur, still got Milroe, who he might be in for a world record green room weight. He might set the record, man. He
might. You still got Will Howard in the mix on that too there. So, and we don't know quite where any of those guys' value is quite locked into. It's like, it could be all over the place, the map with these teams on those players.
I feel like in the last couple of weeks before the draft, everybody realized that Quinn Ewers wasn't any good. So I don't think there's anything going on there. He's a day 3 pick and everybody knows it, but these other guys, like, there really could be, I've even heard like some Kyle McCord buzz. Like, that guy could suddenly be elevated last second.
I think he does 3rd round. So everybody's been putting him in the 5th. I think he's more 3rd roundish, but it wouldn't shock me with how much love that guy's gotten if he might even go higher than that, to your point. And a team like the Niners, who maybe looks for some insurance there with the Brock Purdy negotiations, is another team that could creep up and want a QB. Back to your point a little bit on Shedeur. We've just left the diva age. You've got to be a leader if you're a quarterback. You got to be boring. You got to kind of be like, I ain't here to flash and dash. Jaden Daniels, for instance, to me is kind of boring in a great way. Not boring in the player he's on the field. Not boring in being electric, boring in that this is not a guy that's saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look how swaggy I am. Look at this, look at that. It's about understanding you're a leader. You're an extension of the coaching staff. You've got to operate that way. And I think that Shedur's kind of come on the heels of the Tom Brady era, and he's kind of taken a page out of that book of the Aaron Rodgers and just his vibe and the feel you get off of him. And I think the NFL teams have gotten that feel off of him. And I don't think it resonates with him because you've seen too many examples of this not working out in keeping locker rooms together, that it creates divides, that it is not the fertile grounds for leadership when you have a player of this kind of model type. And I would get it. I don't want to touch that kind of player either. We've been kind of down that road here in Seattle recently in that way. It doesn't work out well.
Yeah. Man, if he gets through all that, because I think Cleveland's a terrible place for him, by the way. He's going to hate it there, bad weather. That's not a good place for him. The Saints make sense, but if he gets through that, then what? Is he going to go to the Steelers? That's another not good situation for him. It could be bad. He could end up dropping like a rock if one or two teams decide, you know what, we're just not going to mess with this.
Well, you got after the Saints, you got the Niners and you got the Rams and maybe the Dolphins in there in the second round. But after that, I think you're right in that if it's not those three teams, you're potentially now dropping even into the third round from Shedur's perspective. And back to your Cleveland point, I think Jalen Milroe more of the guy in line. That would be more of the connectable deal that I would be from a Cleveland standpoint and putting him there. I do think Shedur fits to that offense where Stefanski's going to get him a lot of easy completions, but him in that stadium, him in the inclement weather conditions, not just in Cleveland, by the way, but also then playing in Baltimore, also playing out there in Pittsburgh, out there in the open net weather. I don't know if I like that as I've thought with Shedur for a while. Warm weather, dome. That's what he needs to go to. And then you have the Saints down there. That's the better fit to me.
Yeah, Miami is another good one, theoretically.
Yeah, Miami could work a lot too. That makes a lot of sense. Thrill House, thank you for the $2 donation. I appreciate you for that. Was it Kelsey a fifth rounder? So Zabol, Billy Bean, you don't know.
I think Kelsey was a sixth rounder or something.
It's a fifth or sixth, one of those two.
Yeah,
it is in that area.
Check it out. I'm pretty sure he was a sixth round pick. Yes, he was a sixth round pick. And he might have been drafted as a big tight end. I can't even remember now.
Well, I want to say that you're right. I think the big part of the Jason Kelsey thing was that he had been moved to the center position real recently, maybe even in college. He had been a tight end or he'd been another position. And so you didn't have the years of him playing at that one spot to make the determination about how good he could been. This was still at a time too, where mobile offensive linemen were not held as high in regard, especially a guy that was kind of smallish as he was. Those were looked as kind of fifth round guys. You just have a collection of those kind of, the guy the Colts took, right? Matt, remember the Peyton Manning's a long-time guy there?
Oh, Saturday.
Another guy, right? Taken sixth round, another undersized kind of lunch pail guy. That's just kind of where you took those guys, and with Zabol, he's not an undersized guy. He's athletic, but he's a big dude. So it's just a little apples on that, but it's harder to make the reference to Kelsey on that just because Kelsey had kind of some special circumstances at play.
Yeah. I'm not sure what this super chat's quite trying to say either. It's like Kelsey was a fifth round pick. Zabel's a first, I'm not quite sure what the through line here is.
Well, I think it's to speak into a little bit of the Eagles' ability to find value in these later portions of the draft for a player that you kind of look at as an equivalency that you have to go take into the first round. And, there's probably something to that criticism. There's a part of this pick that I don't like. It's not enough to override, make me upset with the pick. But look, are you reaching a little bit needy wise? Are you going a little bit in that way? Yeah, you're going a couple picks higher for this guy than maybe where he necessarily should go.
Yeah,
it's the right value. Sorry, go ahead.
I agree with you. I do agree with you. I don't think this was a great value pick. I still don't. I think it's a little bit better in light of the fact that a lot of the really appealing guys were off the board. But I know we're on a little bit of an island here because a lot of people thought this guy was a clear first rounder.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't so convinced of Zabel. So I do think that you did kind of make this pick for need. But it's not LJ Collier spending a first round pick on a fourth rounder.
Right.
It's not
Jordan Brooks. Jordan Brooks is a bigger reach. Eskridge was a bigger reach. Yeah, those were rounds of difference. This is like picks of difference, right? Value wise, would you not agree? It's a difference of I keep referencing Graham Barden win 26 last year to the Bucks. So it's you going at 18 versus a guy that should have gone at 26. And that's not a big, those were egregious. Those were horrible kind of picks at the moment they happened. This one is just, that's not a bad, horrible reach.
Yeah. In hindsight, it's not the case, but I thought that Devin Witherspoon was a little bit of a reach, but it wasn't enough of a reach to make me upset. At a certain point, you do have to accept that even when your team is drafting by BPA, there's going to be some subjectivity in there. Yeah. And you have to be willing to live with that. You have to be willing to agree to disagree a little bit on big boards, on who is the most valuable player, on who is the best player available. Yeah, when it's something like this, when it's something like LJ Collier, there's no room to agree to disagree on that. Like, they're just wrong. Like, there's no way you can tell me that LJ Collier was the best player available at that pick. And if John Schneider actually thought that he was, then he's the only person on the entire planet that does. That's not something that I'm willing to just, shrug my shoulders and chalk up to a difference of a point of view.
Yeah. 100% agreed. I think it's an important part of this to not lump this into those other, heavy reaches we've had in recent history, that's not to that bad of a degree. And the other part of this that's, I think, important to consider, Brendan, is that you don't go Zabol here. Booker's off the board. Donovan Jackson goes a couple of picks after Zabol. Everybody likes to think and believe that you're coming back the second, third round and you go get your interior line there. Get your Emawari now and go get your lineman later, let's say, Brendan, right? But we very well could find ourselves getting into the depths of the second round, only to discover that a lot of the names you and I have on our boards are now off the board. And the pickings are a lot slimmer than we might have thought walking into this draft at that point. Now, what do you do?
Yeah. It's very true. It is possible. I think it's somewhat unlikely because I'm just looking at my remaining big board here. I think there's a pretty decent chunk of good interior linemen left. Although I will say, not really at center. Like, that center position's pretty dead this year. So if Grey Zabol is a center and you're looking at him as a center, like, it was either this, Jared Wilson in the second, or forget about it.
I agree with you there. The one thing to keep in mind, though, with this is that you had 3 basically guards taken in this first round. And that speaks to a bit of a trend in the NFL right now for this particular year, where maybe guards and these kind of interior linemen are being held in higher esteem. And look, the proof's going to be in the pudding tomorrow. Do we see a run on interior linemen or not at that point before our pick? I'm going to make a bit of a tacit guess here, though, to say that while there is a lot of names, you're right. I'm going to guess that list is going to get really pared down thinly. And that we're going to probably be getting, when we get to our second round pick, Brendan, and looking back on the Zabol pick, when we landed our pick and looking at those available interior offensive linemen that are available, I think we very likely could be going, oh, yeah, we would have been left with almost nothing here. Or we would have had to been talking ourselves into like, it's Jonah Savania or nothing. It ain't Jonah and this guy. It's Jonah and Luke Condra. Like, you're into maybe that kind of phase by the time you pick late in second round.
Well, I'm a big Savai Naia fan, so I would not have minded that.
I know you are.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Like, he's not bad. It's just,
I don't know. Who's the guy that I don't like? Who's the guy that I wasn't?
Wyatt Milliam. Wyatt Milliam.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good example, actually. That's a really good example. Not that I think he'll play guard, but Charles Grant, I guess.
Yeah. Same kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. It'll be interesting when we talk tomorrow on this, where we found the board to be lying when we did come up and pick. But a couple of quarterbacks we taken, I think you're going to see at least 3 interior offensive linemen taken before we select, if not more. If I see 3 in the first round, that tells me there's probably about 4 taken before we pick. And that means Wilson's probably off. Tate Ratledge is probably gone at that point. Maybe Savania is gone at that point too. And then you're in a real like.
What about Embo? You think he's gone?
Yeah, because look at what's happened to the tackles. You just mentioned Charles Grant. Like, you got Ariante Ariste, Charles Grant, and Mbowes. That's it. The rest of your high-end tackles are off the board now at this point, depending on where you put Anthony Belton.
We need to solve this. We need to get like a sports ombudsman. Like, the president needs to appoint somebody to be like a head of all sports leagues, and he like forces college to start producing better offensive line prospects. This is getting out of hand. We just take the spread out of college. Don't let them run the spread no more. Everything's pro concepts. Now you're back to having to get your ass in there and block. So like, no more patty caking. You talked about these guys doing a lot of that, dance around. You mentioned like Dylan Fairchild or Jared, and it's right. Those guys don't move guys off the line. Why? Because, well, you're passing 75% of the freaking time in college. You don't care if you can run block.
We only do it 20% of the time anyway. And hell, he can just kind of pivot block or angle block, or we'll just have him kind of like reach and hit a reach block on it. He doesn't have to push the guy, just get in his way. That's a lot of what they do there. So it's hard, man. It's hard with these guys. It's not getting easier. John Stillwell in the house. My man John back. He's back, baby. John's back. Dropping a big,
back, John.
huge $100 donation in the chat. Brandon, I got to give him a little bit of applause for that. Thank you for that, John. I really appreciate that. You guys were kind as ever over onto my side of things on my channel today throughout, and you kind as ever here today on this side. So thank you, John, for that $100 donation. It's great to see you back in the house, my man. Hope all is well with you. Been meaning to reach out to you on that side. He says, hi, my friends. He is back. He's back. It's good to see John. Hopefully you had a fun day today on the draft, and always better when John Stillwell's in the house, my man. Always better when John's in the house. Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, good to see you, John. Good to see you around. We're having fun around here right now, I think.
Yeah, we are. We are indeed. And thank you, man, for the monster $100 donation. You guys are very, very kind on our channels and that support. Really appreciate it, John. Thank you so much, brother. Hope you're having a great night. Seth K. Aloha with a $5 donation. Says, solid pick in a position of necessity. Now let's get excited for 4 picks tomorrow. Well, that's a little bit of what I think why I'm a little bit of a proponent for this pick as well, to piggyback on this, Brendan, is that, yeah, you've gone a little bit for need, but maybe what this has now done and allowed you to really do now is once you get in now day 2 with these 4 picks, is to really be able to better operate from value. Would you like to get another interior offensive lineman? Sure. But do you have to? Does it come hell or high water? It's a must. Or you have an incredible value pick drop to you. And that's been my point on this, Brendan, is that the value difference of Zabol to the pick that you had was not that big in the first round. I do believe it's going to be much more substantial of the difference of the guys you have at the high point of your board versus the drop-off that exists for the other guys you have on your board. Does that make sense? It's a bit convoluted as an explanation, but you buying that?
I think I follow what you're getting at there. I think I get you. It's,
you agree?
Yeah. I think like here's kind of what I said at the end of the day. I do think this was a little bit of a reach. I don't think this was the best pick you could have made from a value perspective, but it does represent a change in Schneider's mentality that I think is welcome. This is something that he really fought hard against doing in many recent years, both by his actions and by his words. So for him to be willing to take an interior offensive lineman in the top 20 of a draft, maybe that's worth more than squeezing out the maximum amount of value out of this one specific pick.
Great
at
point.
the same time, like, I don't know. I have to think about that for a little bit here, because I just, as a person, to say that need should outweigh best player available goes against everything that I think as a football person, right?
Yeah.
Like if I were to suddenly say, I like this pick because it's an offensive lineman and I don't care about anything else, that goes against everything that I believe trying to do my channel. But it's not like I think the player's bad or I think the player's some massive reach. This isn't Jermaine Ifedi, right? Mm-hmm. That might be the kind of extreme example, right? Where you have Jermaine Ifedi, you needed an offensive lineman. Let's take a 5th round guy in the 1st round. That's not what happened here. So maybe getting John Schneider to do something like this is worth more than getting the BPA at this particular selection. I don't know.
It'll prove out with time, Brendan. But to your point on that, John Schneider has never taken a guard this high in any one of his drafts. Never. So even Carpenter, that became a left guard, was, I think, taken in the 20s. So I think it stands out that there's a little bit of a change of direction in this one, and it's a welcome one because the offensive line has been the biggest problem on this team for many a year now. Many a year.
Yeah.
At Ethan R. over on your side with a $5 donation. Thank you for that, Ethan. Says, now that we got Zabol in the 1st, what do you think we're going to use our next 4 picks on? So great tandem here with Seth K. Aloha's donation, saying excited about those 4 picks tomorrow. Brennan, if we've got to kind of, spitball this one a little bit and look at who's available and who you, in general terms, how you think this is going to play out. I think it's hard because we are advocating heavily for value, and that in itself is unpredictable and you don't know who you're landing on. But in general terms, how do you think this is going to kind of play out tomorrow?
We need a receiver And I think we'll have the opportunity to get one because there was not some monster run on receivers in the first round. Burden is still there. Higgins is still there. Ayominor is still there. Jack Beschk is still there. Not that Beschk was ever going to be a first-round pick, but he was somebody that was kind of bumping on up.
Yeah. And Trey Harris, Ole Miss, he's still there.
Trey Harris. Shoot.
Kyle Williams.
I would start there. We need a receiver. I am definitely going to be keeping an eye on some of these edge rushers to see if one of the guys that I really like slips down to our pick. Like, I didn't think Ezri Araku was going to be getting past the first round, but as of right now, he is available. So Mike Green, I think now that you're in the second round, it's totally okay to take a chance on him. Somebody like Nick Scourton would be okay as well. So I'm keeping an eye on the edge rushers. Cornerback is something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on throughout the whole draft. I can't imagine Will Johnson gets down to 50. There's just no way. Somebody's going to be like, wait a minute here. This is too good to pass up. But Revel, I would love to get around 50. So I'd say those are the things I'm looking at right now. Maybe tight end, but everything I'm hearing is that Mason Taylor is going to be gone very soon. So if he's off the board, there isn't a lot to get excited about anymore. So those would be the things that I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's a bit of a drop from Taylor. I mean, maybe Harold Fannin, depending on the outlook of the team and where they stand with him. I think I tend to agree, Ethan, with where Brendan's coming at as far as the outlook of the corners. You've got just at the cornerback position alone, for instance, it's a lot of injury risk guys, but there's a lot of high talent of these injury risk guys. Revel, Will Johnson, Benjamin Morrison, all as talented as you can find in this draft, the cornerback position. It's just the injury worries and the concerns you have with those guys is the thing that I think does stand out. Outside receiver, as you also said, I think is a one. Maybe even looking at a guy like a Jordan Phillips in the third round. You know, you jump ahead and you grab on that guy because you did miss out on Kenneth Grant. You do need to still come out of this draft with some nose tackles. He becomes the next, to me, highest valued guy on my board in that way. Maybe CJ West too, if the team likes that guy better, because I know some people do like that guy a little bit better. I think you mentioned edge, Braden Swinson, another name to add in there as a guy to maybe pay attention to out there. But a lot of different directions they can go at this point still. I do expect them, though, of those positions we talked of, Brendan, to probably, of these 4 picks, you're probably looking at like 3 of those picks into one of these positions we've talked about. I don't think it's quarterback. Don't think it's running back. I don't think you're looking at tackle. Not a 3 tech. Probably not safety unless it's like Emawari, I would think, or Winston. So you can kind of narrow, I think, in a little bit on those picks for where the value will be because there's so many good names available to those positions.
Yeah. I would be pretty disappointed if we're here in 24 hours and we don't have a receiver. Like I want one of these receivers. I want one of these second round tier wideouts. I really like this crop.
I do too. And I'm not really super picky with it, Brendan. I think you would maybe agree with this in that, you know, you certainly have guys that we have an affinity for, like a Jack Besch or Jaden Higgins. I think in your case, you love Jaden Higgins a lot. Like certainly these guys are good, but I kind of would be happy that even though I'm not a like monstrous Jaden Higgins guy, in the end of the second round, I'm like, value is great all day long. Jump on him with 2 feet. I can kind of be happy with the variety. Savion Williams even as a gadget guy. I can still wrap my head around that because I think that guy, even if he doesn't develop into a full bore 24/7 wide receiver, he at least is a touch guy. He's at least a weapon guy in this offense. And you can find some productivity then from that because of it.
Io Minor also.
Io Minor blocks his ass off. Guy's just new to the receiver position. A lot of reason to believe that the upside's still very, very there with him and present.
Right. So I want a receiver. That's the main thing I want to come away with tomorrow, I think.
Yeah. Receiver, cornerback. That's where the 2 best value points seem to be as we're going to approach into the end of the second round. Those would be the 2 positions I'd lock into. John Stillwell, kind as ever, after he drops a $100 donation, drops another 20, count him, 20 gifted memberships here on the Hawks Nest. Unfortunately, John, unlike when I'm broadcasting from my Streamlabs OBS, where I can actually see, Brendan's mentioned this before, where you can typically see the actual, donate the guys that got gifted the memberships. Unfortunately, on StreamYard, when we're doing this, John, it doesn't tell me who the gifted guys were. So please do, folks, keep an eye if you can on your deal. I'll see if I can maybe just take a quick look at it here, but keep an eye on your thing. If you just got gifted by John, let's see if I can see it there, John. Yeah, it doesn't show, unfortunately, there, John. So it doesn't show me on which guys got it, but you will be let know if you were just gifted 20 subs. It should be letting you know if you got it. So John, you're awesome, man, dropping a $100 donation and then 20 gifted subs here to the rest of the channel in this. I really appreciate you doing that. Sorry, I can't mention the exact names on that, but please do, folks, if you are a member of the channel, keep an eye on your community post, because that's where I do post out the membership benefits. As soon as the draft wraps up this week and the next week, we're going to be doing a call-in show for members of the channel on Saturday. So keep a lookout for that. But John, man, you've been a great donator to both me and Brendan's channel on our side of it. I really thank you, man, for all of that great support to our channels, as it helps us out tremendously do what we get to do here. And man, thank you so much. So 20 gifted subs. Keep an eye on your membership status. You might have just been gifted a membership free there. So be on the lookout. And if you're wondering who just gave me that, who's the guy that just did that? The man you need to thank, John Stillwell. Give him a thank you. But John, man, you are the man. You are the man. I appreciate it. So thank you so much for all that support. You guys have been awesome with us throughout this process and continued on today. And man, it's really, really, really appreciated. Let's go, John.
Appreciate it, John. Great work, man. Good to have you back. Good to see you around.
Good to have you back, brother. Goyakla. Thank you for the $12.12 donation on Brendan's side here. Really appreciate that. Do you think the discontent about Zabol is from not adapting to the league, finally catching up to the value of interior offensive line, first round guards, plus huge interior offensive line free agent contracts, old thinking process?
Well, in my experience, there isn't very much discontent about Zabol. I ran a poll on my channel, and I think 87% of my viewers that voted liked the pick, and 13% were not very happy about it. I don't think there's a lot of discontent. I mean, I gave the pick a B+, and I had people yelling at me. So I don't get the sense that people dislike this pick that much. So I think the kind of premise of this is...
Well, speak to it from your perspective, discontent, a little bit of like what you intimated at the top of the show, you know, kind of touching, and I think it's valid points. I do. So not to kick it out, but where maybe you were coming from on that, as to why you land there. It isn't just purely that you hate the pick or you're out on the pick or that there's not, you know, it's an awful pick with it. It's a little more nuanced than that, right?
Right. Okay. So I guess if I were to talk about my thoughts on Zabol, I'm a little bit concerned about how tall he is, because that affects your leverage game. The arm length is troubling no matter where he ends up playing on the offensive line. 32-inch arms is a thing to overcome, and it's very rarely overcome in this league. It just is not something you see very often. I think that the short arms affect him too. Defenders will slip off of him sometimes. He'll get a good initial launch into his man. He'll latch on. He'll engage properly, and then the arm length, it just doesn't allow him to stay firmly latched on. Penalty magnet stuff, and that again comes back to the short arms. And there's nothing you can do about that. If he gets to the NFL and he finds out, oh, my 32-inch arms make this untenable for me, there's nothing he can do about it. Mm-hmm. There's no pill you can take to make your arms longer.
No.
And I do think he needs to add strength. Now, I'm not so worried about that. Most players that enter the NFL need to add strength when they enter the NFL. But, yeah, I guess if I had to sum up my concerns about the pick, it would be that. But I wouldn't call it discontent. I think very few people are discontent with this pick.
Yeah, I think to the heart of the question there is that the people that are not happy about the pick are probably pretty unhappy about it, though I know you're not in that place of it. I think another part of this that I would definitely admit to on this being in pro very much in favor of this pick and liking the pick is that, and that is a valid criticism of it, is to say that there is a little bit of a reaching for need. And I think that when it comes to some of those that'll be not out on this pick, but a little bit less than happy on it, they're going to tell you, Gokula, that they're going to say, look, the last 3 years, the road John has taken, the direction that he's changed off of from what was a failing front is to move towards value-based model of picking. And that's brought about a lot of success. And so when you deviate from that process, you head back to the point of failure, which we had been living in through the late teens, Let's not do that again. And I think between Brendan's very apt criticism of him, which is valid, in that, there's some things to clean up in his game. There's some worries from, hey, gets a little tall, doesn't have the length. What's his position really going to be and where it's going to settle in at? You got to throw that all together. And I think there is some room for there to not be just completely effervescent on the praise. But I would also add on to what Brendan saw and what I felt from my chat, which is that by and large, 85% of the people on up are loving the pick and feeling good about it. You need to get this offensive line handled. You'd like not to be in the situation where you're picking for need to get it fixed. But beyond that anger and that frustration, you need to get it fixed. At the end of the day, that's the important overarching part. Something's got to win out over it at the day. You can't serve 15 different masters. You got to serve one master at the end of the day. And the one that's got to lead the day on this is we cannot trot out another offensive line like we have the past couple of seasons. It is the road to outright failure.
Right. And I think most Seahawks fans like the pick from the jump. Like, all you needed to tell a lot of them was that it's an offensive lineman, and they were gonna like that's all they needed to hear. I think for a lot of Seahawks fans, like they don't even need to know that much about the player. They're just like, oh, we did it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does he have a G? Does he have a C after his name? I'm good.
Right. And that's something that I try to avoid on my channel. I want to make sure that I'm holding things to a slightly higher standard to that. But I do think there is something to this idea of John said he didn't want to do this thing, and we all hated him for it. And everyone got sick of him saying, I think guards are overrated. I think centers are overrated. So for him to do this, even if this pick ends up not working out, there is some value to him finally saying, you know what, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do something I have not done before.
Right. Back to that definition of insanity, doing the same thing that fails over and over again, staying in that same approach. First, oh, hey, this ain't working. Let me try something else. Doesn't guarantee a fix, but at least you're not going down the path that's been nothing but imminent failure at every turn as an approach.
I will say, I think that there is an argument to be made, and this is kind of where I fall. I would have rather addressed the offensive line in free agency to get more known commodities, and then used my picks on positions like wide receiver, cornerback, that kind of stuff. I think there is something to be said for that mindset where you want to get proven commodities on the offensive line. Make sure you get this right now. And then you can kind of take a risk at some of these other positions. I think there's something there.
It boils down to you and I are in alignment on this. The best drafts are those drafts that are run by the teams that can operate from a value-based model at every turn if possible. Not always possible. Market conditions dictate sometimes you got to go and deviate, but the teams that can operate is heartily from that realm. When I look at the two teams in this first round that really did this, beyond the guys at the top of the draft that are just picking the no-doubt players, Malachi Starks going to the Ravens at the end of the first round. The Eagles able to land Jihad Campbell at the end of the first round. Why are these teams good for years on end? Why are the Baltimore Ravens good for 20 years at a time, even when they go from Ozzie Newsome to DaCosta as a general manager? Because DaCosta served under Newsome, and Newsome was a guy that was one of the original progenitors of saying it's all about value, baby. It's not about where your depth, it's about value and where you're picking. Get the highest value guy you have on the board, and that's how you're going to walk away with the best drafts and ultimately the most talented ball clubs.
Right.
So there's a reason for it. Big reason. Taker610, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, could Will Howard be a day 2 pick?
Let me think here for a second here. So how many teams still need a quarterback? Saints, Steelers, Browns. Who else is there who still needs Dolphins, maybe. I could the Jets. Who's the Jets quarterback? Is it Jordan Travis?
Zach? No, it's the Fields.
Right. Who else?
I mean, technically the Cardinals are even in play on this. There's wonder about Kyler Murray being a bit on a tentative thin ice maybe out there.
Maybe the Raiders, just to have a young guy.
Maybe the Raiders.
I think they're pretty happy with where they are, but I guess they don't really have a backup right now, do they? Because Minshew's gone, isn't he?
No, I think, and there's been some shooter connections to the Raiders. I think that there's a lot of potential heat to that one. So my answer on this would be yes. I would expect. I was a little bit too bullish on the quarterbacks in the first round, was saying there'd be 3 and there was only 2, but I do believe that Milroe Shadur, and Howard will go into day 2.
I'm going to say he does as well. The Rams, also the 49ers. So really
Rams are
everything.
waiting, man. Rams are waiting.
Yeah, you're probably right. But I
They had no
I
first
do
round
think,
pick.
well, they can take him in the second round though. Or
Well, I know,
third
but I
round.
mean, they're going to address. That's a team that's still trying to contend in next year, right? So, do they? I think like if they'd had their first round pick, they took Shadur, and they were like, "Well, we'll take him with our first round pick." That's one thing, but you gave up your first round pick essentially,
Uh-huh.
to go into that second because they didn't have a native second round pick, so they got a second round pick back. They don't have 2 second round picks.
Maybe Tampa Bay, Baker's entering kind of a big year for him. If he doesn't do the thing this year, and they lost their OC, I think they're able to cut him pretty easily next offseason. So maybe Tampa.
Maybe he's played really well for them. So I
Yeah,
think
I agree, but I expect a big fall off with Liam Cohen out of there.
yeah, it's very possible. I'd say it's very possible there. So there's a couple teams. There's a good seven teams in there that are dancing around in there for these guys.
Mm-hmm.
I expect somebody. I expect a couple of them to go. And the Raiders are a real possibility. The Browns, you've got to think they're going to grab a guy. That's 2 teams at least. And the Saints, how do you walk out there with Spencer Rattler? I mean, Carr's done. He's not playing next year.
Have they confirmed that? Okay. Wow. Okay. Jake Haener, man, it's Jake Haener season. Let's go.
Fresno State, get Grubb. Go get Grubb. He knows how to tap into that talent out there. Talent.
Right.
We'll make it happen. I think so. I think so. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if Howard was the first quarterback that might even get taken as high as his value has escalated up the board at times, based on what I was hearing coming into this draft. Could have been just BS, but that is what we were kind of hearing a bit as we were leading into this. Taker 610 with another $2 donation. Thank you for that, Taker. Says PFF mock Tate Ratledge and Siobhan Ravel to us at 50 and 52.
Ratledge is interesting because what happens to Christian Haynes in this scenario, right? Are we just saying he sucks, we're done with him?
Well, I think you're probably then at that point opening more of the door to poking him into center, and then you're probably moving off Oluwatimi, and then you're probably running with Sundell and Haynes as your center.
Okay, and then shoot.
Bradford's gone.
And then Zabol plays left guard.
Right.
Okay. I mean, if that's the case, I like Ratledge. I do like Ratledge. So
there is a potential with Ratledge he can play maybe left guard too. I'm
That's
not
true.
completely unconvinced that he can't do it because he's pretty athletic and he's a good pass protector. So you give yourself some maybe multiple options with that a little bit. But with those 2 picks, that's great value. 2 guys that I have second round grades on, high second round grades. You're getting them in the later second round portions. Both of them, you're getting them because of injury concerns. Ratledge had a lot of games he just couldn't finish, and that's why he would last us in the second round. And in Ravel's case, he's coming off the torn ACL. So you're hoping to benefit off that, but I don't got a problem with that. You're going for some big upside at that point if the injuries do work out well with both of them.
Yeah, and I love Revel. I definitely love Revel. That's a guy I don't have to say anything about. I want that guy.
He's great. Yeah, he's so much fun to watch. Would have been absolutely a first round pick. And knowing where Will Johnson's health is in this draft, he would have been the second cornerback taken in this draft if he had been healthy all the way through.
Right.
HHG, thank you for the $2 donation. HHG, he says they gave us an A grade for the Zabel pick. Hey,
who's they? Right. Who's they?
I'm not sure on the they on that. Maybe if you can put that in the comments, I'll read it here if you can, who the they was there with that one. But it was nice to hear that the press has given us a little bit of love there. I'm with that. Definitely with that.
I can see why they would. I mean, Grey Zabol was a guy that most people liked more than I did. And I think most people liked more than you did.
The Bleacher Reporter. Sorry. The update on that.
Bleacher Reporter. Okay. So, most people liked him more than we did. That's the nature of this game. We're all going to look at these players and have our own evaluations of them. There was one guy on my stream today who was talking about how, I really like how your big board is so different than other people's big boards. I looked at like 10 different big boards over the last couple of weeks, and they all look exactly the same. It's kind of nice to see somebody who at least has a different approach, even if, I end up getting stuff wrong or people end up not really agreeing with me. He was basically saying that it's It's the nature of this process that people should come to different conclusions sometimes.
The professionals do, right? The NFL teams do. So why shouldn't it work that way downwind of this? And it's absolutely the case. I like it too. It's part of why I try to stay away from consensus boards and what I look like when I'm building my board, just to build it purely by what I see and what I do, because I want to try to get better at this every year. I think you're just pulling off consensus boards and trying to copy, but you're not getting better at the process and refining down, your outlook of it to appropriately gauge these guys. Because I think you look at it the same way of theoretically you get better at this every year and trying to cover it so deeply, and that you get closer and closer to getting better at these drafts. It's maybe theoretical, but it's what I like to kind of think in this process.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why you'd want to go to a, independent small time content creator and expect them to produce the same big board that everybody else produces. Like, what's the point? You could just go to the bigger big board.
Go to the big board. Right. And, some of these guys do, I think, at times get artificially put up in these boards without people actually looking at sometimes at the tape, where you're like, did you actually look at the tape on this guy? I don't think I'm seeing what you're seeing out there. But it's good they gave us an A pick. I think Brendan's right. We got Prisco, who's always hated us. He's given us a B, which for Prisco, that's like giving us an A+, because that guy just rolls out of bed and gives us D+ for whatever we do for about a 15-year period, even when we were winning Super Bowls.
Yeah, I remember that. I think it was Prisco who had the mock draft in 2022 where we traded up to 4 and drafted Matt Corral.
Yeah, that sounds like a Prisco.
That's an all-timer. That might be the worst. I don't think we'll ever get that again. 4th overall for a player who ended up going in like the 5th round.
I was so freaked out in that draft, Brendan. That one in Willis, man. That draft had me just freaked because I was so sure on my evaluation of those two guys, and I was like, don't do it. And everybody was pushing. Remember how hard people were pushing Seattle, like Prisco was there, or a lot of other people pushing him to take a quarterback? Well, you got no Wilson here. Gino's not going to be the answer. You have to take a quarterback. You just got to do it. It's like, oh no, we don't. Not these guys. I don't even think Matt Corral's in the league anymore.
I think he's in the UFL.
Yeah,
I think he's really good in the UFL. He's like an MVP candidate.
Well, there you go. That's the upside for him. UFL guy. He'd be an NFL Europe guy if they were still around. That'd be his lane, but not NFL starter.
Yeah.
Definitely
next year, Shadur's going to be there, and he'll probably be the greatest UFL quarterback of all time.
Yeah, maybe so. If not down there in New Orleans, if not that at least. So, well, thank you guys all for all the donations there again. And John Stillwell, again, thanks for the $100 donation and dropping 20 gifted memberships. Do keep an eye and see if you just got gifted a membership by John, because he dropped 20 here in the chat. As far as tomorrow goes, do you see Seattle sitting and picking? Do you see him trading up to target a guy in this draft, gut instinct wise? I know I'm putting you on the spot with that one a little bit, but are you anticipating that, or you just stay in the pocket?
I guess Schneider hinted that he was looking to trade up in the 2nd round a little bit today when he was giving his post-draft interview. I don't know if that means anything though. Like it feels like you can only. These teams don't want to make deals with each other sometimes. It seems like we don't see as much as we used to. Maybe it'll be easier now that it's day 2.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right on that. I mean, look at how I think the lack of the frequency of trades in this first round had to do with teams looking at this evaluation process kind of like we have. Where's the meat of this draft? Do you have a lot of blue chip players? You want one of these blue chip guys. We got 4 blue chip receivers. You want one of these guys. Or do you have a draft where it's more day 2, there's more meat? You'd agree that really where you look at the honey spot of this draft, the sweet spot of this draft, the torpedo honey spot of this draft is in that day 2 spot, right? Mm-hmm. And so if teams believe that, it makes a lot of sense why those teams didn't want to sacrifice those picks to move up in a draft, going, look, there's a lot of good players that we're missing out on to do that. And it also will, and then you think, make it hard for John to move up in this for tomorrow too. Because
so I'm going to say we stick. I think that's just kind of the default easy answer to give.
Yeah. I think the same thing. I think we're probably just going to sit and pick where just the cost to move up was too great. John would like to do probably something where if he moves up in the 2nd round, he gives up like his 4th round pick to do so. And the cost might turn out to be like, well, a future 3rd and we'll do it. We'll just sit. We'll just wait. We'll wait this out. No, it's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's
maybe you throw a player into a trade to grease the wheels a little bit. Walker, Woolen. I think Sam Howell gets traded, but it's probably not going to be for much of anything. But that would be my prediction. Sam Howell gets traded during this draft.
I do think he ends up going for a 5th round pick at some point or another. Yeah.
Maybe it'll be like Howell plus a 7th for a 5th or something like that.
I think that sounds about right. So, I'd be good with that if they do. We know he's not part of the long term here now at this point with getting a lock in here on the 2-year deal, and it does free them up if there's a quarterback they want to take a little bit in, especially day 3. That I haven't expected they're going to take a quarterback early, but if you were to move Howell, I could see you taking a guy in a day 3, anywhere from a Curtis Rourke to a Brady Cook, kind of in that, maybe even in Ewers. Maybe Ewers falls far enough down to 5th round. I think if Ewers in the 4th and he's picking in the 4th, I think Brendan, he's going to just be sweating and don't do it, John. He's like, I got to do it. He's there. My man's there in the 4th.
Maybe Shedeur will be there in the 4th at this rate.
Maybe. I still don't know if I'd take him. Maybe in the 4th you do at that point, but boy, he's going tomorrow.
I think you're right, but it's funny to imagine.
It was pretty hilarious today where they've got him in his home with his draft cams. Did you notice when they took a shot of him? He's got his cameraman taking a shot, and then behind him you have 3 different other cameramen just in the background of the shot itself. They had literally 8 cameras in that house just to capture every angle. I'm over here did you get enough coverage, Kubrick? Did you get enough shots there, huh? Michael Bay?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, at least he didn't go to the draft, right? Like that's a guy who absolutely could have demanded to go to the draft and just figured, I'll get taken in the top 10. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, I ain't sitting in that green room unless I know I've got a team you ain't getting past us. I'm not going to have that look where every time the shot's on, you're like, trying to act like the camera doesn't exist. They went to a shot of one point with Matthew Golden and he hadn't been picked, and Ted McMillan had been picked and it was 16 and he was sitting there just crashed out, sunglasses on, just looking miserable.
It's like the Oscars, when they're awarding the Oscars and they have all 5 nominees on camera at once. And sometimes you get a great reaction. Sometimes you do. Not often anymore. I think most people know, but I think it was 2004. Miyazaki was nominated for Best Animated Feature for Howl's Moving Castle, and he lost to Wallace and Gromit. And, the look on the guy's face, because he's maybe the greatest animated movie maker of all time, and he's never won an Oscar, and this was his chance. The look on his face was just are you kidding me? Wallace and Gromit? Like you could just tell he's I have more talent in my stool than that entire studio has to make a movie. And you could just tell he was okay, you know what?
That's how I'd be if I lost it. I would just do it just for the memes, if you lose, you're son of a, because they got the camera on, the other guy's over there and then you're over there
mm-hmm.
You're just getting pissed. It'd be hilarious. It would add to the spice a little bit for the show, I bet. So that's how you got to roll it, man.
Yeah,
how you got to roll it. Any final thoughts on this draft here for the next 2 days, or anything that we didn't maybe cover that you had on your mind in regards to what's the goings on are, or what the feel is?
Not really. Not really. I think we're good. I mean, we didn't even trade, so it's not like we have more draft capital or less draft capital. We have the same amount of draft capital going in that we had coming out.
100%. You got what you got coming in, going out. You're sitting pretty, though. 4 picks still within the top 100 selections of this draft. You're taking care of the interior of the offensive line. You're supremely driven at this point not to have to really reach at any point in this draft for need at this point as you go forward. And just hopefully we can have some grade A, awesome players fall in our lap as we move into the rest of the portions of this draft now from John's perspective. So it's going to be a fun couple of days, Brendan. I appreciate you doing with this after a long day of streaming on your side of it, doing these breakdowns with me. We will be back over on your side created tomorrow night after the show. So we'll be keeping these BNBs going, and maybe even on Sunday if we got any gas left in the tank or if our voices are just tapped out by that point. I thank you guys for all of the donations in the chat today. John Stillwell, you were the man tonight. I'm here with that $100 donation and all those gifted subs. A lot of people in the chat today, well over 700 just on my side alone here on that. So thank you guys for jumping on in here late at night, 11 o'clock. These are our Hawk fans. They're tapped in, Brendan. They're tapped in. You know what I mean? They don't need to be, we don't need to go to sleep. I'm thinking about this team. What are we doing tomorrow? Where are we at? What moves can we make to make this better? So I love that about our fan base. Thank you guys for staying clocked in with us here. Thank you, Brendan, for doing this show with me. We will be back in less than 24 hours to do another wrap up here. And we'll see what our Hawks do with these mighty fine 4 picks in the second and the third round, able to do more damage than any other NFL team tomorrow. Brendan will be live streaming on his channel. I'll be live streaming on my channel. Just have both of them up at the same time. And then it's like you have us both streaming together. It's kind of similar like that, you know?
Absolutely.
Thanks for watching, though, you guys. If you can, hit the like button on both sides. Please do get subbed up to Seahawks, Brendan Nelson, or the Hawks Nest, whichever side you may be on or maybe not subbed up to. It'd be really appreciated on both of our sides of it. Make sure I don't miss any last-minute donations. I didn't, which is great. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back soon, but until that time, we got the meat and potatoes pick. Lions getting taken care of. Fans can start to settle down. Now the real portion of this draft takes hold. So get excited, but don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.